Hello friends, meet again with Ndrow Movie here. As usual, don't forget to pray for you all to always be happy and healthy in the future. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please subscribe. In this video I will discuss one of the films entitled, Bone Tomahawk 2015. Let's just start with the storyline of this movie.
At the beginning we are immediately shown a robbery that has just been completed by two men. It was clear that the victims had to die with slashes in the neck. After being satisfied with the items that have been obtained, the two of them immediately rushed again to leave the location, which without realizing it they had entered a forbidden area. If we see the situation there as usual. But not again after one of them had to be hit by an arrow, don't know where it came from, and the movie started. Sometime later we are transferred to a husband and wife named Arthur and Samantha. Arthur, who is better known as a cowboy in a city called Bray Coffee, also has to stay at home. After he got quite badly injured on one of his legs. Luckily, Samantha is a medical expert, and Arthur himself doesn't have to worry about his recovery. Then we look again at the situation in a bar, where the bar has just been visited by another cowboy named Brooder. Different from Arthur, this Brooder more often travels to foreign places, which humans rarely even visit. It is not known exactly what places he has visited. But what is clear is that this Brooder still has a humble nature. At the same time, we are introduced to a sheriff named Franklin, and also a deputy or assistant sheriff named Corey. Just about to take a break, Franklin even got a report from Corey that there was a stranger who looked suspicious at this time of night. Franklin couldn't help but start moving to the last location of the person, which turned out to be he was also in the same bar as Brooder. No need to be polite, after being asked but where the answer is. Franklin immediately shot the man in the leg, and took him to a holding cell. After the incident, Arthur's house began to be visited by Brooder, where Brooder asked Samantha to come to the holding cell to remove the bullet from the stranger's leg. Feeling that it would not take long enough, Arthur also allowed his wife to go, even though he himself still wanted to be alone with Samantha. Arriving at the detention cell, Samantha immediately prepared her medical equipment while accompanied by one of Franklin's subordinates named Nick. While Franklin and Corey immediately rushed away from the place, to return to their respective homes. That night also saw a horse farm being guarded by a man. But the man realized that something was going on inside his stable, so that all the horses started to make quite a noise. But upon inspection, he did not have time to see anything, because his own neck had to be cut by a mysterious figure. In the morning Franklin, who had just wanted to have breakfast, was visited again by a horse breeder, who claimed that one of his men had died horribly. Hearing the report, Franklin immediately asked Corey to check the scene, and indeed, they got evidence that the officer had died with his stomach contents spilled out. Worse still, Franklin didn't find anyone else in the detention cell, but he only found an arrow stuck in the wall. With this discovery, Franklin immediately informed Arthur that Samantha, Nick and the stranger had been missing since last night. Feeling shocked and disbelieving, Arthur couldn't help but have to take part in a meeting held by Franklin in the bar. At this meeting, Franklin began to invite one of the residents of Indian descent. Because Franklin suspected that last night's attack came from an Indian tribe, but not after the resident said that this arrow was a weapon from one of the nameless tribes living in the desert area. But Arthur didn't want to stay still, and he began to force Franklin that he could still ride. Because Arthur was very enthusiastic, so he was allowed to come along, but on one condition: not to trouble the three of them. Before leaving, each of them began to ask for blessings, both to the wife who was still alive and also the wife who had died. It was only after that 3 horses were immediately prepared by Brother. This time Arthur deliberately brought his own horse. Relying on weapons and makeshift equipment, the 4 of them continued to convoy. On the way, they were enjoying the surrounding scenery. When the sun began to set, they immediately decided to rest, which of course their level of vigilance must be maintained. Even before really taking a break, Brooder also took the time to surround their location with a rope that has been hung with many bells. Of course, in the hope that the bells will signal if there is a threat while they are resting. When morning came, the journey was resumed. No fear at all haunts them. It wasn't just fear that was a problem for the 4 of them, but the wound on Arthur's leg that was starting to look troubled. But what are you going to do? Their journey had already begun, and the 4 of them were rushing back at that very moment. On this second night, Corey started telling Franklin about the wound on Arthur's leg. Corey feels that Arthur will not be able to continue to impose his condition. Moreover, the journey is still very far. Not long after, their tent was visited by 2 foreigners who claimed that they were explorers. It's just that the brother immediately shot the 2 people, because he knew very well that they were 2 thugs. The next day the time began to change so quickly, for which they had to rest again on the 3rd night. Unfortunately, their alertness was not as good as on the 1st or 2nd night, so they did not realize that all their horses had been taken away, nor did they know who had taken them. It's so scary, the desert area like this. Whatever your luggage, it will definitely be confiscated if you are just a little careless. A situation like this is very detrimental to the 4 of them. Especially for Arthur himself, which in the end, Arthur could no longer keep up with the pace of his friends, and he asked them to put stones along the route. If you look at it, you can't bear to be with Arthur, where he really is very far behind, while his friends have already rested for 1 hour, not because they are unfaithful to Arthur, but that's how cowboy life is. They really hate being pitied, be it friend or foe. After resting for a few hours, Arthur was again awakened by Franklin, and this time he could no longer walk. What can we do about it? There is no other solution to help Arthur. Apart from carrying out emergency surgery at that time, it was still a good thing, because the Corey was quite familiar with surgical methods, in which he also deliberately brought anesthetic to be on guard, guarding it with makeshift tools. Arthur began to be executed in an instant, which resulted in him being immediately abandoned by the 3 of them. But leaving them was not just leaving. They also marked each trail with some rocks. On the 4th night, Franklin decided not to rest, because they had to continue the journey, which tends to be more time-consuming. Then the morning came, and this time they were very close to the headquarters of the nameless tribe. Where it is clearly visible, there is also a patch of road that has always been used by the people of the tribe. But unfortunately not long ago entered their territory. Brooder even had to be hit by a hot child repeatedly, which caused a bit of chaos in that location. As a result, Brooder had to die at that very moment, and he admitted that he had often traveled to the area and had killed 116 members of the tribe. So don't be surprised if they also attack the city with the aim of doing the same thing, like what Brooder has done so far, which turns out that their success can't be celebrated quickly, because some other members are starting to become aware of their presence. Even then, Franklin and Corey should have been mercilessly slaughtered at all. But in reality they were still alive at that time, and were immediately brought into their nest by being pulled with a rope. And sure enough, in their nest there is also Samantha with Nick, who is being locked up, while the foreigner has been eaten by the tribe. Considering that it's all just a matter of time, Franklin and the newly arrived Corey are forced to witness the last seconds of a Nick that it's clear he will be the next meal. Without further ado, all of Nick's clothes were immediately removed at that very moment, and they also intentionally skinned Nick's head alive. Even before it was fully cooked, Nick's throat was immediately stabbed with a sharp wood until it penetrated the brain. And the thing that hurts the most is Nick's body is deliberately flipped 180 degrees, which is where his crotch began to be slashed until it split in two. At the same time, Arthur seemed to have woken up from his unconsciousness, and he immediately went to continue his journey with a condition that was still not so good. Arthur continues to follow the signs of the rocks that have been given by his colleagues. When he arrived at his destination, Arthur was even visited by two people from the tribe. Fortunately, Arthur was very quick to deal with the threat. At that time, Arthur immediately slashed the neck of one of the tribesmen. After he realized that they always communicate with a bone embedded in the neck. After that, Arthur returned to continue his curiosity while blowing the bone. Indeed, it is a very effective way to slaughter one by one people from the cannibal tribe, which is where Arthur is able to pay in installments to kill them. In another situation, some members of the tribe began to realize that a stranger had come to their nest.
And the opportunity was immediately used by Franklin to fight.
But unfortunately, Franklin's actions ended in death for himself, to the point that his stomach was split open at that very moment. Unfortunately again, the tribal leader even fiddled with Franklin's weapon. Even though he didn't know at all what his function was, what was clear from that curiosity, Franklin had to be shot in a ridiculous manner. Fortunately, at that moment Arthur had arrived at their headquarters. And Franklin immediately slaughtered the chief of the tribe until his head fell off. But what can I do? Arthur's arrival still doesn't mean much to Franklin himself, where Franklin intends to stay here to kill the remaining members while waiting for his death. Meanwhile, Arthur, who had just rushed out of the place, even accidentally saw two members of the tribe who were heavily pregnant, and he deliberately kept them alive, with the excuse that their descendants will no longer disturb the Britpop city, as long as there are no people who disturb their existence. At the end of the film, Arthur, Samantha and Corey start to hear several gunshots from inside the headquarters, which is clear that the gunshots are the last fight from Franklin himself before he actually died. And the movie ends. A film story that is quite heartbreaking. Okay friends, maybe just sink into the discussion of the storyline of the 2015 Bond Tomahawk film, until we meet again in the next film video. Don't forget to subscribe this channel, like and also share videos from this channel.